magic screen?
That's my lighting, right?
Oh, your lighting's great. All right, I see faces on OBS. That's always a good sign. So, good afternoon, since you're on the East Coast. Actually, it's afternoon for me too, since I'm here in the Midwest. But hello, Jonathan. How are you, my friend?
Hi, Nate. Good. This is
Good,
great.
good to talk to you again. It's been a whole like 72 hours since you and I hung out on some kind of a video feed. So, it's good to have you here on the show. I see you have that same background going, with that fire. It was fun for me to watch. There's one point where dude sticks like a marshmallow over the fire, like with his fingers, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that doesn't seem like the best way to roast a
In
marshmallow.
just a few minutes, my buddy's going to come along and he's going to warm up the fire a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And
there it
and
is.
there he
There it
is.
is.
There he is.
On
And
cue.
you also have a canoeist that comes by at least
The little dude
once.
comes by.
Right,
Right.
right.
Then, if you notice, right throughout this whole, if you can stick with us for an hour plus,
Yeah.
that sun will move and um, we'll have a little bit of an enjoyable sunset. This
Right.
is I like this one because it's a lake in Scotland.
Oh.
And that's a very comforting place. It's a happy place for me.
Yes. Yes,
So
it
I was
sounds
like,
like it.
okay, well, I'm gonna have a happy place because you really don't want to see what's really behind me.
Well, I have seen what's really behind you, and I agree. We prefer to see the virtual background. I probably, you'd think by now, a year into this, I would have cleaned up my office, but
Yeah.
that's too much work.
Yeah.
So I'm probably never going to do that. But
I'm in the middle of a COVID, creating my COVID nest, COVID office, and I'm it's not quite that done yet. I have a bowling alley that's being put in to the right hand side of me, and actually with this, guess what this is? All right, can you guess?
is that like a nail gun thing? Is that
Very good. Yep, it's pneumatic.
that's
Hardwood. If anybody's put in their own hardwood
oh
floors,
my God.
this is the device you do it with.
Wow.
And it's a big thing. I was joking around with you earlier. I said, a lot of people, I know Mark Richards has on his back wall the nice violins and
Yes.
string instruments. And that's great. And of course, Neil Ford has lots of books. It's good too. I just want a wall of hand tools.
Right. Exactly.
My,
See,
my
now
shed that's out back.
I'm a software guy, so hardware for me is just a no-go. I mean, I can screw up all sorts of projects using a hammer, and I know I'd hurt myself with one of those, so I shouldn't even be allowed to rent one.
I got a little Pomodoro thing going on right here. I got
this guy.
a little coding, little workshop presentation, a little research. 25 minutes. Take a break.
Okay.
I'm out nailing hardwood.
Go lay some flooring. This is starting to sound like Scott Davis. Scott Davis refloored his den, as I understand it, during the Christmas holidays there. So maybe I need to up my game. I don't know.
Home Depot loves all of us now.
Ooh. Yeah, no, I know my limitations. That ends poorly for me. I'll tell you how bad I am at doing hardware things. My wife and I, this was a few weeks ago, hung up a rack to hold our bike rack. The bike rack we put in the back of the truck.
Yeah.
And I did this on the side of my garage where it is finished, but you can see the holes or the screws from where they drilled the plasterboard into the studs. So I was pretty confident I knew where the stud was, right? So I go ahead and mount this thing, feels pretty sturdy. And then I slide the 70-pound bike rack into it, and nope, that's not in fact a stud. So cool. So we ended up actually putting it on an unfinished side of the garage because then I knew exactly where the stud was. I have to guess.
Yes.
That's how unhandy I am. So. Well, who knew this was going to?
Story.
Oh, please tell me stories about home improvement.
Because it's a story hour. I don't know if this was. I'm a father of 3 teenagers right now.
I'm so sorry.
So when we got our bike rack, and you mentioned it's 70 pounds, 3 teenagers, 2 adults, that's 5 bikes.
Yeah.
That's the biggest bike rack you can actually.
Yes, it is.
Find. Very close to the biggest. Like there might be a 6 or an 8. There might be a Brady Bunch one out there, but
it's a trailer at that point.
Well, yeah, exactly. You're talking roof, back, but this is just back mounted. It was on the back of our Honda Pilot. So I got all excited. We got the hitch on there, and we're all getting ready to go to Cape Cod, a nice beach weekend or beach week. Get all 5 bikes on there, but I had to get the bike rack on there. Mm-hmm. So I'm out there. My son, my older son, he's probably 8 or 10 now. You'll notice, like, I think I'll do a good job in this next hour. I probably will not cuss use a swear word. It may slip. We'll see.
Probably fine.
But I don't, as a thing for his father, I just don't swear in front of my kids, especially the young ones, right?
You are a better father than I am.
James is in the garage watching me wrestle with this bike rack. And you have to lift the bike rack up,
right,
70 plus pounds,
yep,
get it into the slot, and then you got to get the bolt in, right?
Yep.
So,
and to be fair, anybody who's ever mounted a bike rack knows it's like 0.5 millimeter is all you have for wiggle room to get the bolt to go all the way through and come out the other end.
Yeah, it's pulling in and pulling out.
Right, and it's very possible you'll get it in one side, and then it, for whatever reason, does not come out the other side until you jiggle everything.
And then you get your cell phone camera, like you get the light on it.
Right.
And like,
what's going on here?
But I was a little bit before that, and I was barefoot.
Oh, so no.
You see where this is going. So I got the thing up on the bumper, and then I dropped the bolt. Oh, damn. Ooh. So I dropped the bolt, and I won't go down to reach the bolt, and bike rack slips off the fender.
Oh, no.
Onto the cement floor? No,
onto your foot. Yes, of course.
Toe. Full smack center toe.
You don't need that toe, do you?
Apparently not. I still have the toe.
Well, that's good.
But it exploded.
I bet. It's
awful. And I didn't swear. My son saw the whole thing.
That's impressive.
Right? But it's like, nope, not going to happen.
That's really impressive. There would have been swearing. There's no getting around it. My son's 14, and so one of the interesting debates that we have around the house is what movies are appropriate for the 14-year-old. And it's really interesting because there's this set of movies that are rated R because PG-13 didn't exist when they came out, and there's some movies where it's like, okay, I'm not gonna let him watch John Wick. Like there's a lot of violence, a lot of gore. Like, yeah, that's over the top. But if a movie is rated R because there's swearing, I'm like, whatever. He's heard way worse from me. I'm okay with it. So you are clearly a better father than I am, because there is no way I would have refrained from swearing if I had just lost one of my toes to the 90-pound bike rack. Times.
We watched Blazing Saddles about 3 months ago.
Oh, geez.
That was a lot of awkward silence.
yeah, I bet. There's
I thought it was, you forget these things when you review some of these.
Right.
Subject matter, politically correct.
So we did have a comment saying you need to watch out for the fire next to you. I think we're good. I feel pretty good about that. And I assume this is Mark based on the
Mark's joining us.
WMR 513. That's very clever there, Mr. Richards. So yeah, it is Mark. He's going to keep track of the swearing today. So he's now. My understanding is that the limit from PG-13 to R is 2 F-bombs. I think you can get away with 1 and still be PG-13. As soon as you get to 2, then it's rated R. Yeah, so I guess that'll be part of our game today, is to see if we can stay on the PG-13 side of that or not. I don't know.
We'll see.
Anyway. Well, Jonathan, you live in the great state of Connecticut. Now, my very first guest, Mr. Cousin, is also a Connecticut. What do we call, people?
Connecticut? Yeah, actually, my son James just ran through like a half a dozen or a dozen like nicknames for Connecticuters.
Yeah.
Nutmeggers is
Nutmeggers. Okay, it's all about the
Constitution State Nutmeggers.
Sure.
I don't know why not. I've never seen any nutmeg growing in Connecticut ever, so I don't know where that comes from.
Oh, who knows? Who knows how some of this works? I think Minnesota's official muffin, like, who knew there was a state muffin, is like blueberry. Like, okay, that seems pretty standard. Like, couldn't that
be just muffin tops? Maybe that's just
muffin top. I'm down with that. That's the only part of the muffin really worth eating. So which part of Connecticut are you in? Because this is something that Ken always makes very clear to me, is there's a magic line running somewhere through Connecticut, and if you're on one side of it, you're more of a New York, Connecticut person, and if you're on the other side, you're more of a Boston person.
Well, it's kind of funny. There's a 95 goes from Maine down to Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a north-south route. But if you look at 95 in Connecticut, it actually goes east-west, so it really confuses people.
That checks out.
It has to go up to Boston.
Sure.
So you could say, well, I'm on the west side of Connecticut or east side of Connecticut, but I could be on the north side or south side. And I'm actually on the south side on the shoreline,
Okay.
south of 95, south of the Boston Post Road, also a road that goes from Maine to Florida.
Checks out.
And so we're in the Connecticut shoreline area. So I'm about halfway. I'm just outside New Haven, but more toward the Boston side. I think kind of like 91, 95, 91 goes from New Haven all the way up to Hartford, Springfield, and then Canada. Skip Vermont there.
Wow.
So either side of 91, which is bisecting Connecticut east-west.
Okay.
So I'm on the eastern side of that.
Sure.
Which would be technically closer to Boston.
Okay. So does that make you a Boston sports fan? Are you one of those people?
But I lived in Fairfield County, which is on the west side.
Okay.
And my wife, Carolyn, grew up in Chappaqua, New York, where the Clintons are now.
Okay.
And that's a Yankee country.
Okay. Okay.
So part of the ceremony and dating area of my life was going to Yankee games.
Oh.
Becoming, this is Derek Jeter time.
Oh, well, that's understandable.
We enjoyed ourselves.
Yeah.
Lovely beers.
Sure.
But I also knew, there's the Red Sox. Yeah. Going up to Boston, that's a whole event in itself. And I've done that a couple of times. I don't know, I've got feet in both arenas. And if I say one thing one way or the other, there's people you can piss off. And
get a load of this politician just straddling the line. I love them both.
I'll kiss babies on both sides of 91.
We get that here in Minnesota too, because the sort of 7-county metro area is pretty close to Wisconsin and the border. And so it's very common to work with or live in neighborhoods with people who grew up in Wisconsin, moved over here or work here. I knew plenty of people who lived in Wisconsin would commute into the cities. That's not abnormal. It's not that far. And so you run into an awful lot of Packer fans. Although I will point out that I think in virtually every airport I've ever been in, I see at least one piece of Packer attire, whether it's a hat or a shirt or a sweatshirt, a jacket. It's incredibly common. So I think they travel very well. So I can understand you're trying to straddle, the border there a bit. So
and then you can hear they'll also say, well, are you a New England Pats fan or a Giants fan? My brother-in-law, huge Giants fan.
Okay.
I've got friends that are huge Pat fans, either side of the fence. So I'll just say New Orleans Saints.
There you go. Just pick a team that's completely out there. Fantastic.
Everybody's like, what? That's not New England. I'm like, yeah.
You're right.
Deal with it.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned the Cape, and for those of us who are in the Midwest, I always think the Cape, and I think very exotic. I mean, is it really as Tony as I think it is, or is it just you go to the beach for the weekend and everybody does it?
It's lovely. It's so, and everybody says, well, where on the Cape? And then you do this thing, right? Well,
okay.
Right. So where on the Cape are you? It comes out from Massachusetts, right? You got Boston, that's up here, Plymouth.
Okay.
So where are you on this thing?
We're getting a geography lesson today.
So this is geography. So Provincetown up here.
Okay.
A lot of fun, especially if you're, you like to have fun. And then, so we usually stay in this area.
Okay.
It's around Eastham, Wellfleet, wonderful. Chatham's down. Great area. The thing that's changed on the Cape, which is really interesting. I used to go there with the kids when they were younger, in the bike rack days, before toe. Right?
Before you broke your toe and
before the toe, right?
Never rode a bike again.
Right. And we used to go to the ocean side, right? So the inside is the bay side and the ocean side is the Atlantic side, raw, next stop is Iceland,
Oh, geez.
On that side, and then you have the John F. Kennedy created the National Seashore. Wonderful, beautiful, pristine beaches for miles and miles. In fact, you can jog along that beach and just really, really get lost.
Wow.
But we used to go to this thing called the Coast Guard Beach, and a lot of people would just go swimming there. And we used to go there all the time. and body surf and hang out and, oceanside, rollers and a lot of fun. You can't swim there anymore because of the seals.
Okay.
So the fish population went up, seal population went up,
And that brings with it.
great whites,
Yes.
shark land. So it's impossible to swim there now. I just would never go. I mean, I'd go up to maybe my ankles,
Sure.
But fortunately, the Bayside is still nice, and it's actually warmer water. But you don't get the body surfing. I love the body surfing. So I miss all that.
It's funny you bring that up because I was going to go there if you didn't, because one of our wonderful events people, Patrick, is, I think he's actually relocated to the Cape now, if my memory serves, but I know he has spent a lot of time there, and he and I were talking about that the shark attacks have gone up, and I remember, again, this is all pre-pandemic, so who knows exactly when the timing was. We were having a chat about it, and a week later he like sent me a video that someone had taken just on their boat, and the shark is just like circling around him, and I'm like, oh, charming. That's one thing you got to love about having 12,000, 13,000 lakes. There's no sharks in any of our lakes. You don't have to worry about that. There are invasive species, but not things that are going to eat you. That would
Maybe
keep
something
me
will
up.
get in your shorts, maybe a leech or
Oh,
two. That's
yeah,
about it.
might nibble on a toe or something, but not going to do any damage, probably. Well, I mean, a muskie might, but they don't hang out with us. So
Yeah. Yeah.
awesome. So have you ever you bust up your toe? Did you ever like get to the beach then, and did you ride your bikes, or was that like a trip to the emergency room at that point?
Yeah. So that vacation was dad in a little boot for a
Nice.
couple of days and
Nice.
no water. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely a couple stitches on that. Put everything back inside.
I've never thought of that until you mentioned it. So now every time I put the bike rack on, I'm gonna have to think about, let's not lose a toe here.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. So
Just spread eagle. When you're doing it, feet on the side. Just
maybe I'll have to get my 14-year-old to do it.
wide
That's
stance.
maybe that's the smart money. Just let him do it. So anyway. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. You're obviously a technology guy, or else I wouldn't be hanging out with you here. But
Oh yeah.
how did you get into technology? How'd you become a computer guy? Like, what was your journey there?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I know, and I know a lot of. So I've been doing a little binge watching on Chair to the Keyboard. You
Thank
got,
you.
you got, you got a stack here.
I try.
You,
I try.
you can spend a good week just binge watching all this stuff. This is
See,
great.
everybody's reached the end of Netflix anyway, so you might as well just spend some
Yeah,
time on YouTube watching the show,
what's Nate doing?
right? Who's
It's
Nate talking
gold.
to this week?
I notice a lot of people like to go back in their history. So I'll give you a little bit of my background. Zenith computers. Heathkit used to have these computers that you could build yourself. Z89s, and then there was the Z100s. And the operating system on those was ZDOS. CPM was the original one, a digital CPM. It was before MS-DOS. And then Zenith started creating ZDOS before so Zenith and Heathkit got together, but then
That
that
sounds
all
like a
crashed.
nickname, doesn't it? Hey, what's up, ZDOS?
ZDOS. But it was a lot like MS-DOS. Basically, it was all these DOSes,
Sure.
CPM and DOSes. So I got my early start with CPM and then ZDOS, and then that led in MS-DOS. These were Intel 86, 88s. And then from there, started writing games in BASIC, that kind of kid thing to do. I remember it rained like 2 inches one day, and I just did a deep dive into like copying, programs out of BASIC books.
Nice.
And learning all about that. Let's see, and before that was actually just programming a lunar lander on an HP calculator. Remember the HP calculator? You can actually put in all the instructions, and then you play the game, and then you turn the.
I think that's basically what NASA used to, land people on the moon, was more
that
or
was
less
part
that
of it. It
computing
was like
power.
it was the
Right.
same algorithm.
Right, right.
Gravity,
Little known fact.
velocity, amount of fuel you had to land. So it was a whole idea. So that really actually got me started on that and Pong, on the Pong games. But so I was just enamored by this whole computer thing. So when my future boss, who was my dad's partner, came into the house with the first computer, and he said, "You want to know how to do this stuff? Read this chapter, and this chapter." And I did. He actually became my mentor in my career. We started. He taught me Fortran, and then I was doing Fortran with assembly language.
Oh, geez.
Uh, there was a shared memory buffer. So we were doing real-time data acquisition and pulling. This is when I was in high school. We were pulling data from laboratory instruments. And he was a guy with an oscilloscope and a soldering iron and MIT electrical engineer, and he could put together anything. So he was running his own business with my dad, and so what he was doing was real-time data acquisition, pulling in data from his A to D card that plugged into the PC bus on interrupt 0, interrupt 21. So remember the Peter Norton books?
Yeah.
Right? Before all the virus stuff, right? Peter
Right.
Norton was really known as being a guru for DOS and interrupts, MS-DOS, and how to program at the assembly language level with the IBM PC interrupts. So I started getting into that. And so there was this idea of like shared memory between the assembly language. So I wrote a little bit of assembly language to get that data, put it into a memory buffer, and then Fortran, you had the ability to have Fortran map to the same physical memory address on the PC. So it's like read and write buffer. That was crazy. And then I wrote a GUI before Windows to do menus and using the mouse and mouse clicks and stuff. That's crazy. Yeah. So I was there for like 10 years. It was fun. And we worked on like a patented oil detection system. I started getting into like RS-232 radio telemetry of data using a Radio Shack. Who's this? Radio Shack radios. So this guy, he took apart these radios and then hooked up an RS-232 between the two radios. We actually had it running down in New York City Harbor.
No way.
At Con Edison, we had these buoys that were floating in the water, and they were sending RS-232 data.
Wow.
So I wrote the Central Base Station data application for it, all before Windows.
Wow.
It was using Borland C.
Okay.
An old language called Actor, which is an early object-oriented programming language. That's what really got me into object-oriented programming, was Actor programming language. And then I got me into C++ and then MFC. One of my regrets in my career is I didn't look at Linux early enough, especially now, with everything else going on with Kubernetes.
Well, I hear this is going to be the year of Linux on the desktop.
Oh, it's phenomenal. It really is. Yeah, I still I'm always embarrassed. I'm still at a PC, and a lot of you guys have been saying, and even Mark was like, you get rid of that, just get a Mac. But
you're one of the very few people I know who's not on a Mac. You're get your certificate of non-compliance here shortly.
Absolutely, yeah. But I want to switch over to a Linux box instead of a Mac.
One of those guys. Okay,
oh yeah,
it's fine. It's fine.
I have some makeup time.
But Mark agrees with you that Lunar Lander was a fun game. So there you go.
Yeah, there you go, Mark. Yeah. Exactly.
You see an idea. I've had to have that conversation with my son because, iPhones are just air to him. That because he basically was born when the iPhone came out. It was roughly the same time frame. He was a few months old when the iPhone was announced, and so to him, a phone is just a slab of glass that has all these games and other things on it, and you watch YouTube and blah blah blah, and that's just what a phone is. And I had to explain to him that games didn't look like this when I was his age. We didn't have these, because he'll ask me about, can I play this game or that game? I'm like, yeah, that one's pretty realistic. I've played versions of that, and I'm not quite ready for you to do that. And it's hard, I think, for younger folks sometimes to realize how much progress has been made there. I was playing FIFA one day, and my wife just kind of glanced over and she said, "Hey, who's playing?" And I said, "Well, I'm just playing a game." And from the kitchen, she couldn't tell that it was a computer game as opposed to an actual real live game. And I think it's pretty remarkable to see the progress from programming your calculator versus what we have today.
Yeah, I did a Star Trek game using just monochrome on CPM, and it was like shields up, and it was Klingons coming at my ship, and it was crazy. I was trying to do 3D stuff on a 2D screen. How's that work?
Right.
It's crazy. I explained to my son, 16-year-old, yesterday, driving back from Boston. We did a college tour.
Oh, geez.
I just showed him. We were just talking about games and stuff and how it was different. And I was talking about Rhode Island School of Design. So
Oh,
I had a
yeah.
friend that actually went to Rhode Island School of Design. She studied all that, you know, background and digital. Started getting into like digital stuff because it was the next thing that was coming along. So she worked for Prodigy down in White Plains, New York.
No way.
Prodigy was before the internet, before
Yes.
AOL. This was the
I had a
transition
Prodigy
from,
account when I was a kid.
yeah, it was a transition from old, cryptic bulletin boards to like something a little bit more consumer friendly
Right.
with graphics.
Right.
Her challenge as a designer was, you've got 6 pixel, make an icon,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got 16 colors. Go
Good
at it.
luck.
Yeah, communicate something to the user that to click there to buy something.
See,
With
that,
it.
now I guess this isn't as much of an issue today because the idea of saving is almost become a bit, old fashioned. Things just sort of automatically save in many situations. I was helping my son with something and realized that I still have that muscle reflex of, Command S, Command S, Command S all the time, and that you don't need to do that. And whenever he was using, but I still think it's ironic that the icon we use for save is something that many computer users could not
Mm.
actually tell you what it represents.
Yep.
So I mean, that's yet another one of those instances of how much this industry has changed, certainly during my career.
The get off my lawn thing, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I remember the day when I had to park my heads on my Winchester drive before I could move my PC box to the next table.
Well, and you bring up Prodigy. I remember the Prodigy at the time, at least that I was involved with it. You didn't get to choose your user ID. It was when you bought your piece of software at the local software place in town. The packet that you had when you installed it, that was then your ID, and you had, I want to say, maybe 6 numbers to be like blah blah one, blah blah two, blah blah three, blah blah four. And so then that was your email address was this incomprehensible string of letters and
Yep,
numbers, and
exactly.
like that's your username. Like, oh, cool.
So between my junior and senior year in high school, I was working for my mentor, and it was still on the Z100, beefed up to 512 megabytes or something like that,
Oh my
or
gosh.
kilobytes. No, it was 512. I don't know. It was more memory than more canvas stand.
Sure.
Beefy box, still monochrome. And I had this idea. I was like, hey, I've got this, because I did a semester abroad for my high school. I was like, I'll go back for the summer and work in Madrid.
Ooh,
I'll work during the day and hang out with my friends for the summer.
sounds
I
good.
proposed this to my boss. And he said, yeah, go for it. So I put my Z100 and the monochrome green screen into 2 different boxes, got them on the plane, and went back to my, Madrid family for the summer. So I think it was one of the first people to actually, this is like slightly a few years before the Osborne portable computers.
Okay.
The Osborne were the suitcase with
Yep.
a small 6x6 screen on it with a keyboard that flipped out. So this is just before that. So I remember flying to Madrid. Nobody knew what a computer was.
Right.
It was pretty crazy to park that and plug that in. But I actually was productive
Yeah.
slightly.
How could you? I mean, I would have been spending all my time in Madrid. Actually, I would have probably gone to Barcelona. That's been one of my biggest sort of disappointments in this whole pandemic is, my normal couple of trips to Barcelona have not happened now in more than a year. And, one of the last big family trips we took, actually, my wife and son came with me on a hook through Barcelona and through France, and God, I miss that. So how did you enjoy Madrid as a young lad?
It was phenomenal.
I bet.
There was a social club called Joyaslava. It's still there, actually. I've talked to some people who are from Madrid, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember Joyaslava. It's still there." It was this dance thing, It was teenage dancehood, and drinking age was, I don't know, whatever it was, 16, 12, something like that,
14. Yeah.
14, and I just had
You look
amazing
old
time.
enough.
An amazing. It was a lot of fun.
I bet.
Talk about language immersion.
Yeah.
It's the way to do it. So
Did you have any Spanish before that? How did you dive into that? I mean, that
it
seems like
was,
a
yeah, it's Spanish, high school Spanish.
sure.
And then there was a program at my high school where it was like a couple weeks abroad in Madrid as part of a
Sure.
co-campus kind of a thing. It's kind of what they do in college.
Sure.
So I did that, and I got friendly with a bunch of people when I was there. And they were like, "Come back for the summer." I'm like, "Okay."
Sure. Sounds good.
You're talking to my boss about this. So I was like, "Yeah, I can bring my computer over."
Now, where do you stand on the very famous ham that one can get in Spain that is often found hanging from shops as you wander around? My wife has a bit of a love-hate relationship with that. So she spent a
Right,
semester there in college. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on the here. Let me just
fried
shave a
ham.
little bit off the ham I have hanging over my shoulder.
Right. The prosciutto dried type of ham,
Hmm.
right? Cured, smoked. No, I know. It's delicious.
Yeah, it is.
The food in Spain, especially Madrid. I like Barcelona, but Madrid has this other feel to it, and I really love Madrid
Hmm.
because it's old. It's old Spanish,
Sure.
and true Spanish. I really love it. So I have a fondness for Madrid, and I miss it, and hopefully we'll get back to it. But it's yeah, I definitely food. You know, some people talk about, which I think one of your questions is some of your guests is like, what's your favorite? What's your comfort food, or
Yep.
what's your favorite food? And you're talking about the Michelin star restaurants.
It's because I record during lunch, so
You're
I
like
have to bring up
double
food
double.
because I'm hungry. So
For me, it's there's lots of foods I like. Like I love like a really good fondue. In fact, the last time I had fondue was at
mm,
Mark Richards' house.
uh-oh.
We had a lovely fondue together. Just and it's not kind of like an old 70s thing. It's not the
Yeah.
old 70s fondue pot. It's like, fondues. So that's a happy thing for me. A good lobster here in New England,
Mm,
that's a happy place. But
mm.
another happy one, and it's, food is really tied to location.
Yeah, it is.
I went to New Orleans. I lived in New Orleans for a long time. There's a lot of food there I love, like a gumbo at the gumbo shop in New Orleans in the French Quarter. Oh my God, put me in a happy place. In Madrid, it would be going into an old Spanish style restaurant and ordering the day's paella
Mm,
and just
yeah,
diving into it.
yeah.
I mean, you can have paella like in other different places. It's not the same.
No.
Like it's worth traveling in the airfare and all
Yeah,
that.
agreed.
COVID just to have the good paella.
Right. Yeah, there's something to be said for the tapas, the small plates. Oh man, that's good
That
eats.
too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun, especially if you've got a nice sized group to just basically order half the menu and just try different things. And I miss that. I think that's one of the things that Neil really taught me about traveling is embrace what is local to that place that you can only get there or only get authentically. Like beignets, you bring them to New Orleans, and I immediately think of beignets.
There you go.
And
I've made them here for my kids. They're like, meh.
it's not the same. No,
No,
I've
two
done the
o'clock in
same.
the morning after seeing the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and then trying to like get yourself together.
Hmm.
Go get a hot coffee and a beignet, a cafe de monde.
Yeah, yeah, that's good eats right there.
I like it.
Yep.
But
Oh yeah.
Seville, Spain,
Hmm.
and Andalusia. That hopping along the tapas bars, go from
Hmm.
bar to bar, and then sampling their tapas along those streets. Unbelievable. And I know, tapas you can get in like other cities, like New York City.
Not the same.
Not the same.
Nope, not the same.
I went
It's
to when I was in Berlin for O'Reilly. I found a nice tapas place around the corner. Great Spanish tapas place, but
oof.
it was in Berlin. Yeah, it
I
wasn't the
mean,
same.
it can be interesting to see a take or a slant on it from a different culture. That's always kind of cool to see, like what happens if we mix these two things together or take sort of a German approach to a Spanish dish or vice versa. I think can be very fascinating. But to your point, that sort of authentic, I mean, again, the beignet is a perfect example to me. Like it's pretty hard to get that outside of that, and I don't know if it's something in the water. Like you live close enough to New York to know about New York pizza and how it's the New York water, quote unquote. I don't know, but I think it certainly has something to do with the place and the sort of expectation that
It
we
is.
bundle with that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's Anthony Bourdain thing. It's like that's a big part of it. Boy, that was a loss. Boy, miss
So,
that guy.
so tell me more about New Orleans, because I mean I've been there a couple times, love it. It's a beautiful place. I think I would melt if I went there in the summer. I would be fine there in the winter time, but the heat and humidity would probably kill me. So what brought you down there? What was that all about?
Just get out of New England.
Checks
I
out.
I really wanted to like something different. For
That would be it.
fortunate enough to have a college experience like that. So
Sure.
I got down there, and I actually it's very consuming. If you are serious about your studies, don't consider New Orleans because it's very distracting. I took a so well, in terms of humidity, you learn to love it. You have to. You just have to embrace it. I
I
mean,
suppose.
a lot of places are air conditioned, but you have that oven door effect though. When
Right.
your class is over, or you're ending something, you get out of the mall or something like that. Open the door. It's like it's not. It's violent.
Yeah.
It's a violent experience.
Yeah.
Where that door opens and you get hit with it in the middle of the day with just before a thunderstorm when the sun's still out, but the rollers are coming in. You open that door, it's sweltering.
Yeah.
But you just learn to embrace it. You're like, okay, I'm going to go home, and I know I'm going to sweat, a gallon, and I'll go home, take a shower, turn the air conditioner on, and settle in. You just kind of deal with it. You have to learn to embrace it. And just like in New England, you have to put your coat on and just deal with it.
Yeah, in the Midwest, we have to deal with this thing called winter. With the exception of I think San Diego, every place has some weather for some part of the year that's unpleasant.
Yeah.
But I don't my experience with sort of that southeastern heat humidity tells me that the number of times I'd have to change and shower during a given day would be extensive. So at least that's my experience. Yeah,
I lived in an apartment in the French Quarter for a while.
Oh wow!
And it was I took some time off school, so a semester, and then a summer, and at an apartment in the downtown. And it was an apartment building. It was an old slave quarters. It was had historic buildings, and it was had a long history to it. But basically, it was a pile of bricks with some doors on it and a garden. So I lived there and studied acting for a little while. It's kind of fun. But I just embraced it. I embraced the town, and I embraced what it was like to be part of New Orleans. And then at the end of it, I was like, okay, after I graduated school and everything, I was like, do I want to live here? And after being in Connecticut, New England, I was born in Pittsburgh, but I really grew up in Connecticut. After being up here so long, I miss the four seasons.
Sure.
Every 3 months, it's different.
Yep.
Right now, the flowers are coming up. It's part of your psyche.
Right.
New Orleans, you get like right around Mardi Gras time, it's kind of cold and chilly.
Sure.
And then it gets hot again, Yeah. That's winter.
Right. It's a 2-week period when you don't need to change 3 times a day.
I decided, time to move out. And the software industry, especially back then, it was not booming in that area. So I was like, well, I can go into oil and then I can continue with, software engineering. So
sure.
Then I moved back to Connecticut and got into oil on water detectors.
You're in a place where you probably could have written that same software and not dealt with winter. So, trade-offs.
Well, I'd be spilling it in New Orleans, but in New England, I was
detecting
trying to find out where it was spilled.
Fair enough. Would you ever go back to New Orleans? Would you ever see yourself living outside?
I can see myself. I definitely want to visit. I haven't been back, and I so miss it. And we would have gone already with the 3 kids just to show them what it's all about. So it's another country.
It is
so much culture, music, the food, the historical background. I just Chilean Basin, just going on a fishing trip in Chilean and see the alligators and catch some catfish. Unbelievable, those experiences. The fisherman's paradise, right?
Well, the food scene is amazing as well. I don't think it gets quite the credit it deserves for the amazing food that you can get in that city.
Yeah, but even outside the city, getting out into the country, gorgeous. The swampland,
Mm.
with the Spanish moss on the oaks. Oh, I just, yeah, it's very comforting to me. I'm having an old Tennessee Williams kind of feel of nostalgia of New Orleans, that
Totally.
area.
Totally. Nice. Nice.
Cat out of a hot tin roof.
Oh man. Yeah. It's one of the things that I found really interesting about this, where we're at in the pandemic, is it's very clear that a number of organizations have embraced the work from home. I mean, obviously not everything can be done work from home, but a lot of things can, and a lot of things that maybe in the past we thought couldn't be. So I'm be very interested to see what that looks like, sort of
Yeah.
post pandemic, and what travel looks like. Are people going to, you're in a situation now where you could live there and yet work on things all over the world, and it isn't quite the restriction it would have been when you came out of college. And it's
Yeah.
interesting to see that shift.
Yeah, I always, there was always that fantasy of like, well, I could live anywhere. And in the past, it's always been much more of a, well, I need to be near something. I need to be
Right.
near some kind of industry. I need to be near between Boston and New York for, optimal kind of economy kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. It's different now. And I've seen a lot of, job postings,
Yep.
people, advertising things. And one thing I've had noticed is like completely remote, where
Mm-hmm.
before that was questionable. It was like, well, and there were even some things where it was like, well, it's remote now, but once this whole thing's over, we're back to the office. There's some of that, but more and more I'm seeing remote and probably permanent.
Right.
And of course, that could be just a fishing, baiting the water a bit, but
Sure.
I think it's opened that up, and it's something that the software industry has been trying to say to the industry as a whole, saying, yes, this is a thing, and we are productive,
Right.
being remote. But it wasn't corporate that was allowing it. But I think that those barriers are broken down a bit, right? But I think of the responsibilities in a lot of software engineers to not mess that up, right?
Right.
Given great responsibility, make sure that you are continuing to, be productive
Yes,
and
with
do
great power
your
comes great
work.
responsibility. Yes, get stuff done. Yeah, that's a great point. No, yesterday my son and I went up to our golf course. I had every intention of playing golf because when I made the reservation earlier in the week, the weekend was actually supposed to be very nice, and then of course the weather cooled, and then we got this sort of drizzly, rainy thing out of the north, and it was windy and chilly. And so we were up on our putting green, and I just kind of looked at him and I said, "Do you really want to play in this?" And he's like, "No." And I said, "Okay, well we'll cancel the tee time." And then I said, "Why do we live here?" And he said, "Yeah, Dad, why do we live here? You could do your job from anywhere there's a major airport. So why haven't we moved yet?" I'm like, "Well, that's a good question. It's a complicated question. It's a
Yeah,
long question, but
right.
yeah."
I had a friend of mine. He was involved in Kubernetes with me on one of my teams, and he was, right hand person in terms of great software engineer. Um, and we were working in the same company, but he was one of those employees that we hired remotely,
Mm,
and he was living in Madison, Wisconsin. And during that whole time, he actually bought a sailboat and then decided, yeah, I'm going to do 6 months in Augusta, Florida, and then 6 months in Madison,
sure.
to snowbird kind of a thing. And that worked out pretty nicely. In fact, he found that the Wi-Fi was better at the boat
Oh
rather than
no, you're
Madison,
kidding me.
Wisconsin. Yeah, because he said he was outside of Madison, Wisconsin, kind of like the edge of a cornfield,
Sure.
and he said literally the copper like ended at the end of his road, and to get it just to go a little bit farther was difficult for him.
Wow,
So his connectivity went way up as soon as he said, "Yeah, I'm just going to do it in Florida."
that's
So
hilarious. I have to admit, I think that's a pretty good way to do it if you can get away with it. Because summers in the Midwest are fantastic.
yeah,
Winters in the South are fantastic. Kind of that's not a bad way to do it, frankly. So more power to you if you can get away with it. But
mobile economy.
right,
I
right.
remember, I remember some software conference I was at, and there was a booth that said, "Be a software engineer in the Cayman Islands." I'm like,
Ooh,
I mean, I was already used to humidity, right? So that's
sure. So you're like,
you have to
fine,
embrace
not a
New
problem.
Orleans humidity to work there. But I was like, oh, I could do that.
I did actually float something like that to Christine last night as we were eating dinner, and she just looked at me and said, "No, I'm not going to an island." I'm like, "Okay, all right, no islands. All right, good. Good pro tip right there. I did not know that. My wife draws the line at an island, so we will not, in fact, be living on an island at some point in the future. So
It's one thing to live on the coast.
we've now limited. We're narrowing it down.
Yeah,
That post child lifestyle. But now, speaking of the water, my understanding is that you enjoy this thing called sailing that I believe also Mr. Richards partakes in. So tell me more about sailing. How'd you get into that? What's that all about? What do you have a boat down there at the Cape? What do you do?
I do, not at the Cape. It's a bit
Okay.
far to take it, but I
Okay.
do have. So we're on this thing called Long Island Sound. Long Island is basically a big sandbar. Now, my apologies to anybody on Long Island.
That's fine.
It's a glacier dump. When the glaciers came down, that was where all the rocks got dumped. So behind that is a nice Long Island Sound, which is about, I think the widest stretch across is like, I don't know, 30 miles, something like that.
Okay.
I forget what the widest thing is, but it's basically a very large saltwater lake that has tidal flushes and comes in and out. So on the Connecticut shore, there really are no waves. It's kind of like Lake Michigan, right? Where
Yeah.
it's area body of water. You can see across it. You can see Long Island on most days, but it's protected. So my sailboat is on a little tidal river just inside of that. So it's a 31-foot O'Day. Somebody knows old sailboats made in the 80s. It's lovely. It's basically a camper that has a sail on it.
On the
right?
water.
Yeah, it's got a little, galley and a little toilet and a couple places to sleep and
Sure.
hang out, But yes, it's wonderful. You can take it out, go around. I haven't done anything as adventurous as Mark Richards has. You have to ask him about his stories about sailing, but he's got a few.
We'll have to have him on again as a returning guest so we can dive into his history setting.
Ask him, say, Mark, what's
Tell me a
your
story.
adventures with sailing? I'll give you a little.
So tell me about when you were a pirate.
But yeah, it's in my past life, I knew somebody with a sailboat, so I learned how to sail there. I learned how to sail on Lake Pontchartrain in New Orleans too.
Oh, wow.
Sailing class. So I've always wanted to be around the water. I had temptations of marine biology.
Oh,
If
yeah.
it wasn't for computers, I probably would have gone that route. Which, watching Mark Richards' interview, I didn't realize he actually went down that route. And
I was
then
just
he
going
went
to say,
astronomy, which
speaking
I
of
also
Mark.
love. So, a lot of overlap there between. Maybe it's the software thing. I don't know, but yeah, it's funny how you find these paths in our lives,
Right.
different things. But I've always been passionate about the water, being around the water. I love diving. I miss diving. I haven't been diving in a while, so I want to get recertified. So yeah, fishing.
Now, when I think of sailing, I always think of the big, very fast World Cup kind of sailboats. Obviously, that's not what you're piloting there, but I always envision it as having a team of people to try to keep track of that. I assume it's not nearly that complicated to take your boat out. You don't have to have three hands to help you.
I need to have one teenager, otherwise it's just a Winnebago.
Gotcha. Checks out.
It's a lot of fun.
Nice.
It's got a little outboard. It's got not an outboard. It's either an outboard motor or an inboard motor. Mine's an inboard motor that's designed. Actually, the motor itself actually comes from tractors, right?
Really?
So when they started creating these, they figured out like back in the 70s, fiberglass molds, epoxy. We can just start cranking these out. So they started creating these molds, pouring epoxy into fiberglass,
Sure.
and then pumping these things out. And then the market got saturated.
Okay.
But in the time that we were doing all that, O'Day and a couple others, they were looking at okay, we need to put a diesel engine in these things. What's a reliable place? What are diesel engines that are reliable? Like tractor engines.
Sure.
We got the parts.
Checks
we got
out.
the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right. We do the same thing in software.
Right.
Like we come into the new industry, it's like, okay, we want to create Kubernetes. Like,
Reuse.
What do we use? Well, containers been around. Well, what are containers based on? Linux. Linux been around 20, 30 years. Good. That's our engine. That's our tractor engine.
It all comes back to Linux.
Lots of parts. Right. There's a lot of people know how to fix those things. So you get newfangled things like Kubernetes.
Sure.
It's just Linux underneath. file mounts.
It's Linux all the way down, right? That's how this works. Yeah.
I have to get software in here somewhere. And I figured that's the way to do it.
It's
I went from
fine.
tractors to Linux. I don't know how I
Sure.
did that.
My understanding is right now there's a worldwide chip shortage and it's making it difficult to build things like tractors and trucks and whatnot because chips are in everything.
Right. As well as Bitcoin mining.
Well, sure. I mean, I assume that my computer is mining Bitcoin right now. I mean, the fans are spinning up, so it must be doing something other than just, OBS broadcasting here. But no, one of the other things that you and I were chatting about, 3 days ago when we were having a little catch up session. Um,
Yes.
Tell me more about maple syrup. Now I can get behind this. I love me some maple syrup, and in fact, my alma mater, there are a very select group of people, and I have not found myself in this circle that can get their hands on maple syrup that comes from our campus. Our local, the monks that sort of founded it, they continue to actually harvest that. And if you kind of know the right person, one of those falls off the truck. I don't know the right person, so I don't know. Maybe I have to donate more. I'm not sure. So tell me more about maple syrup.
Talk about, these industries. We had it during COVID, right? But he's doing sourdough.
Right.
People love getting into these memes, right? A few years
Hey, I'm doing
ago,
the bread. I'm all over the bread.
yeah, absolutely. I love the bread. It's great. Years ago, people got into like the beer kits,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that the whole cottage industry of brewing at home, and it's taken off and actually turned into more microbreweries around,
Yep.
which is great. Good industry. Um, but when you have resources that are local, a lot of people are getting into chickens, right? So suburban people are like, they go to their local Tractor Supply store and then they're like, hey, there's chicks. We'll get some chickens.
They're so cute.
But they're so cute and tasty. So
That's
a lot
it.
of people, get into these industries. And one of the ones that's very approachable actually is tapping maple trees in your local backyard,
Oh,
if you
sure.
have access to it. Of course, I know
Right,
not
right.
in the woodsy area, but I have enough trees in my yard so that I could do a decent tap. And then I had another friend that had some very old maple trees on his property. So he actually brought in his car a sloshing bucket of maple syrup. Now you think like, oh, how much syrup do you need? It's something like, what's it, 50 to 1 or 60 to
Yeah, it
1?
gets distilled down pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's a lot of burning. So really what maple syrup is all about, it's about standing around the fire in
Mm,
slightly cold weather um, with beverages.
gotcha.
And the output is a pint of delicious
Right,
sweet syrup that
right.
your kids wind up pouring onto their waffles and throwing it half away in the garbage. But it's
Not
the
cool, man.
experience
Right,
of
right.
cold and collecting and doing the 60, 50 to 1 and enjoying the day with a friend who
Yeah.
brings their syrup over. It's, for me, it was more of a social thing.
Nice. Nice.
But if I was going to, there's people in my neighbors around the area, they have like a full, shed that turned into a sugar shack
Oh, sure.
with a wood burning stove, and you got the pan and um, where it's a steaming event, right? It's a lot of it. It's about putting enough fuel in there to generate the steam to boil off all that water to get down to the pure essence of. And boy, it's satisfying when you get down to that tasty bits.
Right.
You can't mess it up,
No.
really. I mean, you could burn it. You have to be a little careful about not getting, but you have to do the fire just right.
Sure.
But there's a very approachable technique, which is just called open kettle. So you don't really need any fancy equipment. You can just take your syrup. A really bad way of doing it, just put it on your electric stove.
Sure.
And we use at 61, but that's not very earth friendly, right? Take some wood and scraps of wood around your yard, make an open pit, and then get a large enough pan or something that has a large surface area, and just boil it all day. But it is a commitment. It's a commitment to all day. I think I started one day at 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, let's do this. We'll be done by the evening. I was going till 2 o'clock in the morning.
Be careful what you get into, right?
It is. So.
Yeah, I have this very thin desire to maybe get into more authentic barbecue. I certainly grill. That's one of my things, but I'm pretty close to buying a new grill that would also allow me to do a light amount of smoking. I mean, not racks and racks and racks of ribs, but you could probably easily put a brisket or something like that, or a turkey. So part of me is kind of like maybe that wouldn't be a bad way to
See,
spend an afternoon.
and I commend you. You mentioned you're a charcoal guy.
I am a charcoal guy. Yeah, we had that conversation, didn't we?
I agree with that.
Now, my wife would like to make the transition to gas because it is obviously easier, faster, more convenient. And I'm open to having both, but I don't know that I can live with myself if I don't have charcoal. I don't know.
Yeah. The other, the aspiring videos that have been on, I don't know if you've been watching those there's a series of this guys that's outdoor cooking.
Oh, sure.
Love, those are great videos. Very, he doesn't talk at all. It's just him creating something like a stuffed, goose or something like that,
Mm.
just on a fire and put together the garlic and the onions and the fresh ingredients. I mean, I guess he likes to sell his knives, so that's always a
Sure.
thing on it. But it's fun to watch somebody just cooking on an open fire.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying,
Yeah.
earthy.
Yeah, I
I
agree with
like that.
that.
That's why I like the maple syrup making
Sure.
because it's outside and doing something with your hands, something away from this rectangular screen.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the fascinating things to me about, quarantine here in this pandemic world we've all lived in is it seems like a lot of us have reached for something like that. I
Mhm.
mean, the bread baking, the, maple syrup, something that is more physical or, the tactile maybe is the word I want to use there as opposed to constantly staring at a screen. There's definite fatigue involved in that. I mean, I think it's ironic that I say that as we're, being broadcast on Twitch here, but are there any of those kind of quarantine habits that you're hoping to continue? I know you've gotten your jab, so you're on the other side of this, so to speak. Do you think you're going to keep up with the maple syrup now that you're kind of going down that path? Is that going to become a
Yeah,
Jonathan
I
special?
want to do that on a regular basis,
Nice.
every year. You have to time it right.
Oh, sure.
It's not a calendar thing; it's a weather thing. So you have to really be like December. You really have to start being in tune with what's January looking like.
Sure.
So it's a timing thing.
Hmm.
But there's usually nothing going on in January and February,
Yeah,
anyways.
it's a fair point. It's the donut hole for most of us in our schedule.
Um, so yeah, definitely continue that. I mean, Strava, it's nice. Just it's funny thing about Strava is like, oh, I'm going to go out running, and then what do? You wind up going back to a rectangle, down a screen,
Yep.
and you're engaged in this thing. It's like, wait, the whole point was to get outside,
But see, if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen, Jonathan.
right? And my friends wouldn't know, and all
Right.
that.
And they
So,
wouldn't comment on my ride.
right. So then you get into that, like,
Yep.
it's. I think it's a healthy mix of you know our applications and things we do online, but I think the physical world is really good. That's why I love sailing.
Yeah.
It gets me out, go fishing with the kids. Whatever that therapy is, I think it's really important people stay connected to the real world.
Oh,
The
agreed.
dirt, earth.
100%.
You know, um, any excuse to do that. That's very healthy for your soul.
Mm-hmm. You bring up Strava, and one of the challenges I find with Strava is that, like, because my wife and I are going through a metric century training plan right now. So it's basically like 2 weeks you kind of ramp up, and then you have a light week, and then 2 weeks you ramp up, and you have a light week. And what my mind has a hard time processing is I see like my relative effort score is like up here, and then I have the down week, and it's like, oh, this is like you didn't do anything week, and I'm like, my scores are really low. Well, it's supposed to be, right? And you have to remind yourself, no, that's the point of this. That you have to give your body a chance to absorb that training so that you can have a harder week coming up, which is what I began today. I had 2 rides this morning, so we're already knee deep into it. But it's interesting how that gamification can kind of work both ways. It can encourage you to do things that you wouldn't normally do. For example, Christina and I have done a number of these Strava walk challenges.
Yeah.
And so there's been more than a few times where she and I will be like, well, we should probably go for a walk because we still need 11 kilometers to get that little badge that it's not like I can sell it
Yeah.
or, print it out,
No.
but there's just that sense of accomplishment. But then there's the then you feel bad that, oh, my workout wasn't as intense as I wanted it to be or whatever,
Right.
right? I mean, it's funny how your
Right.
brain works both ways on that. But,
Yep. Yep. It's another round of endorphins, right? So you can get
right.
the runner's high or some exercise high from things, but there's also this, feedback of chocolate in your brain
Hmm.
with getting those little trinkets, those little
Right.
points. It is a motivating thing.
Oh, sure.
What got me into it was I always knew about Strava, and I used to do mapmyrun.com.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was uh, I like the Strava and what they're doing with it. So, and I noticed my old high school was doing a challenge,
Oh, sure.
and I was like, yeah, it's time to do this.
Sign me
So
up.
that was what got me, moving on that. But I always, just got to look for those avenues because I am a victim, like many of us, of the COVID. So freshman 15. What is the COVID one? COVID 10 or something?
Oh, at least.
Something. So yeah, definitely a victim of that. So I'm looking for more avenues. I'm finding I'm not getting enough exercise just by nailing in this hardwood floor. I use that as that's my exercise. I
Sure,
mean,
sure.
it's
Nah,
not
it's not
cutting
enough. Not enough. No,
it.
no, I agree. I have found that Strava has done an excellent job over the pandemic of having far more challenges than they normally have. At least that's been my observation, and more diverse challenges. So it isn't always just can you run this much or ride this much or swim this much. They've been doing the walk challenges, and a lot of partners have been throwing things out there. Even things as simple as, you know, be active n number of times, for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. To me, that's a pretty fantastic motivator to, oh, yeah, I got to get my 15 or my half hour or whatever. And oh, God, I'll do a yoga session a day so I can get the yoga challenge knocked off. I find that to be very helpful. But
Right, right. And the other thing we're missing, not being on in-person tours, is a lot of us were tracking our walking
a
as we walked during our presentations. It was a
lot
real
less
thing.
walking when you're at home.
Yeah, sitting here, maybe it's a, adjustable desk
Uh-huh.
going up and down, but we're kind of stuck to our places. I think that's
It's
the
it's
next thing. If we could do more of this at home stuff, we got to figure
right.
out a way to animate our bodies, yet stay connected
Hmm.
as
It's
we present. I
pretty
don't know.
hard to get 10,000 steps when you're working from home. I guess that's one downside of the whole work from
Yep,
home regime that many of us find ourselves in. But
exactly.
oh man. So has there been anything that you've been streaming or binging here during the pandemic that you found to be particularly useful, helpful? Any recommendations there?
I got three teenagers. Like
Oh, I'm sorry. That's
that
right. I forget about
is
that.
like schlepping A to B. You got bus drivers. I'm teaching two of them how to drive.
Oh God.
You're like, you know,
I've already I can't do that. Christine's gonna have to teach the kid how to drive. There's just no way. I am not the person to teach my kid how to drive. See,
yeah,
the problem I have when I drive is I have a place to go.
yeah,
And it amazes me how many people I run into on the roads who have no place to be and they're driving very slowly in front of me. And I just do. I don't think I will ever have that. In fact, my kid said that I took him to an allergy shot last week, and he made this comment to me that, yeah, Dad, you're never gonna be that guy who just do. Like, I want to get to where I'm going now, and I hate it when I run into these people who are clearly, 10 miles under the speed limit's fast enough. Like, no, it's not. Get out of my way. So I am the wrong person to teach my kid how to drive.
yeah. There's, with this, at home thing, sometimes, you get in the car and it's like, oh my God, I'm outside. Oh my
Right?
God, I'm out. And there is a little bit of a maybe I can slow down here, or oh, I wonder where that road goes.
Yeah,
Oh, I remember that old neighborhood. Kind of. So I definitely have a little bit of a wanderlust once I get in
sure,
that car and go out and get my little coffee for just getting out. So, and when I do that, I do slow down.
oh sure,
Absolutely.
sure.
It's
Yeah,
like,
maybe
oh,
that's part of it. Maybe I'm not being as sympathetic to what everyone's kind of going through. That you're to your point. For most of us, that is the chance we get to leave the house is to go run an errand or something, and so we
yes.
we look at those a little differently than maybe we did 2 years
Yeah,
ago. But
definitely. Right. I do. I do. Um, yeah. So
so you haven't reached the end of Netflix. Okay, good to know.
no, my passion. Oh, I'm waiting for what's it called? Money Heist.
Okay,
I'm waiting for Money Heist to come back out. That's my passion. My son got me into it.
okay.
My 15-year-old, 16-year-old now. Um, House of Paper. I love it because it's made from it's based on actors and are outside of Madrid.
Oh, nice.
Has that essence of Spanish, and the dubbing, by the way, amazing. I don't know what they've done, but amazing acting for the dubbing. Where it's like
Oh,
most dubbing is like from
right.
it. They nailed it in terms of making sure it's not a barrier for you to enjoy the characters and enjoy everything. Um, and there's a song inside of it, Bella Ciao. It's an old Italian song, and my son has learned how to play it on the piano, which was like so. And every time he plays it, it was like Bella Ciao,
Nice.
a
Nice.
great song, and he does a really good rendition of it. But they've done a couple seasons. I think Mark Richards watched it too. He really liked it. And now they're producing the next one, but they
Okay.
keep delaying the date,
Yeah.
just like software, right?
Right.
There's no continuous delivery with these.
Well, it's pretty hard to film during a pandemic. That clearly brought a lot of productions to their knees,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's difficult to bring a big budget movie out when theaters
Can't
are
complain.
closed
Right.
or at 10% capacity. And so I get that. I'm very sympathetic to that. And I,
Absolutely.
it's interesting because you and I both grew up in the time when you had seasons and you had to wait 3 months to the next season began. And if you missed an episode, well, you had to wait and watch it over the summer. And now
Mhm.
everything is just binge it. And I got to tell you, I prefer the binging. I really
Yep.
do. My wife and I are circling back on some things that either we missed the first time or maybe didn't get into the first time. Like we're watching Deadwood now. And I much prefer to be able to watch 2 or 3 or 4 episodes in a seating and then come back to it in a couple days later. And the shows that we're watching that are still in production, you're like, oh, well, when's season 3 coming out?
Yep.
It's a really interesting sort of mental switch.
I know. Yeah, and very demanding too. So what
Hmm.
do you mean you don't have the next season yet?
Right, right.
I'm done. I
I'm
watched it.
done. I'm ready.
What? Come on.
I want a continuous delivery of my favorite content. Like, where's the next season of Ted Lasso? Please.
Right, right. And the algorithms are getting you too. It's like
Oh yeah, of course they are.
oh, they're just like they figured it out, and
Hmm.
it's interesting to watch that to the point where it's almost like when you watch one thing and you get really into it, and then you watch something else, and you're like, wait a second, you're doing the same tricks here, just different character.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the secret to certain novelists.
Sure,
I think
Stephen
about that with
King.
John Grisham, that seemingly most of his books are the same story, just from a different point of view or a different angle or set in a different location.
Yes.
Oversimplifying, but my wife and I've been doing a lot of writing on the trainer, and so in order to make that tolerable, we watch a movie, and you get to the end of it, and you're like, well, what do you want to watch now? Because you don't want to watch anything you really have to kind of pay attention to. You just kind of want to distract yourself from the 2.5 hours you got to spend on the bike, and so a lot of times we'll just like, okay, what's like this? Like, oh, that looks interesting. Click, and then next thing you know, you're like 7 layers deep in the people who watch this watch this, who people who watch this watch that, and you're like, how did we
Yep.
get here? Like,
Yep.
how did we end up watching this?
Yep. I agree. Yep. Yep. Um, boy, unbelievable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a brave new world we live in. Speaking of content that I have on my list of things. So
I'm
let
waiting
me.
for the next. My next one is the Battlestar Galactica. I was a fan never a fan of the old '70s one.
Okay.
Lorne Green. I don't know. I just never identified with it. But when the new one got produced on Netflix just a couple years ago, in fact, I was reading Sam Newman's book, Building Microservices, and then watching Battlestar Galactica and absorbing it all. That got me started on the Kubernetes route as an architect. It was fun.
Battlestar Galactica got you into Kubernetes.
So I actually have. So I have a architectural question
Okay.
for you. Right.
Okay.
Oh, and it's a spoiler alert if you haven't watched Battlestar Galactica before. But what is it's almost like a DevOps question, right?
Okay.
What was the downfall of the Cylons? I don't know if you know the story of the Cylons. So the
Christine and
Cylons,
I
the
did
idea,
go through the entire Battlestar Galactica this winter, although I think we still have one movie we didn't watch.
right?
But
So there's an architectural or DevOps anti-pattern
okay.
in the series, and which was the demise of the Cylons. So the idea behind the Cylons was these are like microservices. These are pets. These are not pets. These are cattle, right? Pets versus cattle. So you can kill them at any time. And what happens? They get reconstructed.
Get recreated. Yeah. Resurrected.
And that's what happens in Kubernetes. You have these pods with containers. You can kill these pods and containers all the time. And they get reconstructed. If you said, I want 100 Cylons, you're going to have 100 Cylons. So the question is, where do all those Cylons come from? Like, how do they get reconstituted?
Sure.
In Kubernetes, it's etcd. In Battlestar Galactica, where was it? Do you know?
Well, I mean, they had their resurrection ships.
Right.
But it was never really clear how many of those they had, and there wasn't an infinite number.
You use the word ships. You use the word plural. You said ships, plural. Was there more than one?
I believe there were, because they destroyed at least one, but then there was some other one hiding somewhere, or multiples. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, you wouldn't just run one cluster in production, would you?
There's the ANSI pattern, right? So when you have something that is very important, that's stateful, is your constitution,
and always stay within range of your reconstruction system,
or
as well.
have a replicate in a parallel universe. That would be the ultimate, multiple regions, parallel universes. Back up your data into other universes, which is what my wife wants me to do, because our main family computer the main hard drive is starting to go. And she's like, oh, my photos.
You need to back that up.
So I need a parallel universe.
Yes, you do.
Hard drive. Very quick.
I think you can put that in the cloud.
I think so.
I'd strongly advise.
So should I put it in the cloud, or should I put it on actually a physical medium?
You could do both. You could do both. Get yourself a nice Synology and NAS that stuff up, and then throw that out onto the cloud. That'd be the smart way to do it.
Right.
1 is none, 2 is 1.
Right. You're looking at my afternoon.
There you go. So between hardwood floors and backing up of your photos, that seems like a good way to spend your time. Well, let me throw a few lightning things at you here, just to wrap up.
Okay, thank you.
It's always amazing to me how these things come around. Like, I never would have thought we would have connected Battlestar Galactica to DevOps to microservices to Kubernetes. So, that's why.
Tractor engines. Yeah, forget about that.
That's right. I mean, I don't even know why I bother having any questions, because we never get to any of them, which is exactly the point of this. So, coffee, espresso, or tea? What's your favorite caffeination source?
I go right to coffee.
Okay.
Another one I'd love to do on the fire, roast. I want to find a source for green coffee beans and roast. Okay. I just want to do that. How different is that from maple syrup?
Really?
So always been a big coffee drinker. Dark roast, heavy flavors, bold.
Okay.
But I do also love a lovely tea.
See, that's why I got to watch Ted Lasso. He has some interesting takes on tea that I mostly agree with. I've tried repeatedly to get into tea. It just doesn't stick. Sorry. I know tea can be wonderful, but
I love tea, but it's secondary.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm in England, I will definitely have a cup of tea. Thank you very much. But it's not something I seek out in most cases. So,
right.
How about pie versus cake?
Pie.
Ooh, good man. Do you have a particular favorite in pie? Do you tend towards the fruit, or are you more of?
I live in New England, and apples are big in New England. There's a couple of other places in the country, but access to apples in the fall, good crisp apple. Oh man, chuck that in a pie with some cinnamon, and some rum and cinnamon, and a pie.
Oh yeah, done. I like where your head's at.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, we're big on apples too here in Minnesota. And little known fact, Honeycrisp, which is the only apple worth eating. All of the Z-Star is very good as well. That's a Minnesota invention. Thank you, U of M, for giving us the Honeycrisp apple. So, Red Delicious is red, and that's the only thing I can say about it.
It's not delicious.
It's not delicious. It should be the red, mushy, mealy thing that you should never, ever eat, and that's not what an apple actually is.
Right. Right. It's seen its better days, and it's that's the tree that's end of life.
Yeah.
I think it should be deprecated.
Absolutely, Red Delicious needs to be deprecated. 100% agree with you. I'm pretty confident that the answer to this is preordained, but oceans or mountains?
Yeah. Can I cop out?
Sure.
One of my happy places is a very good friend of mine is a Scottish Highlander.
Oh.
Manages an estate in the west coast of Scotland. Wonderful guy. He actually grew up in Kenya. Great story behind him.
Wow.
It's a whole other show we can do on him.
And we'll have to have you and Mark. Maybe we'll have you both come back as a tri-guest. I don't know how I can get OBS to do that, but I'm sure I can, finagle a screen that'll have 3 of us on there.
So anyways, my friend Harvey he's a Scottish estate manager in the Highlands of Scotland. And on his property, it's quite extensive, is 4,000-foot peak mountain.
Mm.
And his house is on the peaty marshy area right next to the loch and the saltwater ocean. Mussels about this big.
Mm-hmm.
You cook on a fire with, pour a little beer in there, a little bit of butter and beer on a fire, and roast them right in the shell.
Sounds good.
Unbelievable.
Sounds tasty.
And there's trout at the top of the lake.
So you want both? That's what I'm hearing you say.
So I'm like, I'm not going to choose. I'm going to, that if you want to find my happy place, it is right there. Right. But I have a dream. Actually, I have a dream that's in my head that I believe the place exists. And I dreamed it a couple of years ago. And it's this place where mountains are rolling down to the ocean and there's a blue water with sandbars. Ooh. So if it is water, that's water, it has to be blue and clear.
Okay. Fortunately,
the water in Scotland actually is clear. Very clear.
I've actually done some work for one of our reps in Scotland, and I've made it very clear that at some point post-pandemic, I need to take a trip over there. And my wife has made it very clear that were I to develop a Scottish brogue, it would be very good for me. So unfortunately, I do not have that accent, nor do I feel like I could pull one off. But yes, Scotland is on the short list.
If you would like to find a guest house in the Highlands of Scotland,
you can hook me up.
I have an address for you.
Fantastic. Well, see, this is I don't think she's listening anymore. Otherwise, she'd hear that, and then she'd be asking when we can fly over. But that's the joy of recording in your own home, is you're never entirely sure. That's fine. It's fine. It's fine. She hasn't divorced me yet, so I feel like I must be doing something more or less okay. And I know how to make pizza now, so I got that kind of nailed. And
right.
We're kind of getting that down to a science. Yeah. So, I feel like for a long time, I felt like the one thing that kept me around was I was the one who knew how to use the espresso machine. And I still think that's the case, although Christine will use it to like steam milk if the kiddo wants a hot chocolate. But I think the bread is probably what's keeping me employed at this point in the house. I make the bread, and
I am worthy.
Right. That's the thing now, is that I make bread. So such is life.
I have yeast, therefore I am.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's the only way to go. But how about DC versus Marvel? Where do you fall on that age-old?
Ooh, I am. I guess not strongly opinionated about it, but I am strongly opinionated about very good animation.
Mm.
The artistry of animation.
Yes.
I love the animation festivals where there's awards that are given out and for animators and doing shorts. Mm-hmm. Big fan of. My favorite animation. So I'm not a big fan of like Japanese animation or quick animation.
Okay.
More artsy, types of animation. There's a video, Google it. It's called Balance. It's about 20 minutes long. I actually use it as a way to talk as an introduction to Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is a state machine.
Yeah.
It's the declarative state machine. It's an operating system as well, and it's always in balance. Right? So one of the visualizations I like to embrace with people is the fact that when you're running microservices on Kubernetes, everything's in balance. So if you look at that video and you imagine all those characters as kind of like being these services that are running on it, that's an interesting world. Not that, sure. I mean, the video is so much more than just, of course, software, but right. It's the way I tie that animation into it. So I guess I'm more interested in the animation aspects of good art. People are really producing indie arts that are in animation. Cool. Even the graphical ones with Disney, with a lamp and what was the name of the production studio?
Pixar.
Pixar. Thank you.
Yep.
Those are wonderful. A lot of award-winning things. When I was in New Orleans, I remember going to a lot of animation festivals and seeing films that were winning all these great awards. And sure. That would be another area that if I was in my career, went the art route, I would probably get into like animation.
Wow.
But it never,
Yeah, I know I don't
dormant
have that
things.
talent.
Like, what if we could live, 300 years?
Oh, sure.
What would we do? Would we have multiple careers?
Oh, assuredly.
You know, often, you tend to do, many people tend to do, 30 years, do my career, 40 years, whatever it is,
Hmm.
done. Some people lucky enough, they have the wherewithal or the resources to switch careers, and learn a new discipline or have hobbies that turn into careers,
Right.
music, like that. But what if we had 300 years where we had the time to say, yeah, I'm going to do a deep dive into this for maybe a generation or two.
Right.
And then I'm going to deep dive into this
Switch
once
gears
that thing
completely.
matures.
Right.
That would be an interesting life.
Wow.
Makes a good sci-fi book.
Culture series kind of gets into that to a certain extent because
Yeah,
you
sure.
essentially live forever, right? And what would you choose to do when time no longer is a constraining factor?
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's a book. One of my favorite sci-fi books is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
Okay.
Tomorrow, Tomorrow, Tomorrow. It's about a guy that his wife dies of a disease, and he basically spends the rest of eternity looking for a cure.
Wow.
And it's really good because it talks about our bodies, versus our a mind,
Yeah.
and where information is. Information is in the universe. So really good book. Tomorrow, Tomorrow, Tomorrow.
We've managed to cover quite a lot of ground here, and as I glance at my clock, we've gone a little long.
What, we're done?
I mean, I don't know what else we could mine here in the next, and I'm sure you have some woodworking you need to get to. I should probably make some bread, or
I didn't talk about my bullheaded shark story.
well, tell me about a bullheaded shark.
No. You're done. We're done.
Well, fine. I guess I should have double checked our notes. Is there something else that I didn't get into that I
wasn't
really
in
needed
the-
to? I mean, it's fine. It's fine. We could leave something for returning
no.
guests.
I think we've talked to each other's ears off. No, that's fine.
Well, I think we're getting close to like 4.5 hours in the last 3 days. So, if we keep this up, people are going to start asking questions. But see, it reminds me again of how much I miss just hanging out in the real world with my friends, because normally by now I would have seen you at least once in the flesh, if not multiple times, and we would have had many opportunities in 2020 to hang out and catch up, and you could have told me about your shark story.
My greatest pleasure last December was you and I had, for some reason, nothing else to do, and everybody else had left town, and we were in Clearwater, and every night it was like,
that was the one place we went to eat.
And we kept going back to the same restaurant. I'm like, that's really good.
It is good. It was good. It's close. Yeah, it was a nice
Yes.
walk, and it was good food. So yeah, I mean, why not? Why not?
And I enjoy getting to know you there.
Oh, it's always a pleasure.
Even deeper.
Of course. Well, we will do that again. I know it's coming. I think I'm scheduled to get the jab this week, theoretically. So, I feel like we're getting closer and closer to something approaching normal. I don't think it's ever going to be like 2019 again. I suspect there'll be slightly less travel maybe than we've had in the past, but it'll be nice to be able to see people in real world. I miss that badly.
Me too.
I don't miss the TSA, to be fair. No offense to the TSA. I do not miss going through security lines and, hanging out in lounges at airports for hours on end, but I do miss seeing my friends in the flesh.
I do too. I just saw my sister 2 days ago for the first time, since all this happened. And it was like, we gave each other nice deep hugs.
Right.
It was really good to see her again,
Mm-hmm.
We talked to each other on video and everything.
Sure.
But it's a human aspect.
Yeah.
That's what we're missing.
Yeah. I kind of hope we're done with handshakes and that for our friends, there's a lot more hugging. It's been a long time since I've been able to give one of my friends a hug. So I'm looking forward to that, my friend.
Me too.
So.
Me too.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I very much appreciate it. You've been extremely generous with your time, and I look forward to hanging out with you. I know you and I will be my grad students will get to hang out with you sometime here.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that is gonna be fun. I don't know when it's scheduled. Time has no meaning. A friend of mine sent me a text this morning and said Happy Monday, and I said it's Monday. Like, okay, if you insist. I don't know. I mean, next you're gonna tell me it's a different month. It's no longer March, but apparently it's not. So anyhow. Well, thank you so much, my friend. I very much appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great week.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
This was a blast. I appreciate it. And I'll have to tell Christine about your Scotland hookup. So, or
Definitely.
Maybe I'll make her watch the show, and then she can learn about Scotland. All right. Well, next week I'm off, but the week after we will have one of the founders of. Speaking of the New York area, I believe he's the Jersey Jug co-founder there. Chandra will be with me, and we'll see what kind of trouble that gets me into. So,
Cool.
thank you again, my friend, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Nate. See you soon, bud. Okay.